Evening. We're on. All right, great. Welcome to the Gathering of Priestesses, the 44th interview. I am Catherine Ravenwood. Your normal host, Gloria Taylor Brown, is on a much-needed vacation, and so she asked me to fill in. So I am here tonight with Shauna Ora Knight, who is an amazing and prolific priestess. I'm going to just read to you some of the things she's done. She's an artist, an author, a ritualist, a presenter, and spiritual seeker. She travels nationally, offering intensive education in the transformative arts of ritual, community leadership, and personal growth. She is the author of The Leader Within, Ritual Facilitation, and Dream Work for the Initiate's Path. She's a columnist on ritual techniques for Circle magazine. Her writing also appears in the anthologies Stepping into Ourselves, A Mantle of Stars, Calling to Our Ancestors, and Bringing Race to the Table. And if that's not enough, in her spare time, she's the author of urban fantasy and paranormal romance novels with wonderful characters such as werewolves and vampires. And she is an artist of mythic artwork and designs, which are used for magazine covers, book covers, illustrations, and also they decorate many walls and shrines and other sacred spaces. Shauna is passionate about creating rituals, experiences, faces, stories, and artwork to awaken mythic imagination. Shauna, I'm worn out just reading all that. Welcome, and come on and tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction and the opportunity to be here. I keep busy. I'm not often bored. I'll say that. I actually never intended to travel around and teach leadership and facilitate rituals. In fact, what I often say, because I teach workshops on how to facilitate workshops, which is a little navel-gazing, but it's useful because there's folks out there who have a lot to teach, but they aren't necessarily good at public speaking. And what I tell people is, if I can do it, anybody can. Because 10 years ago, actually it was exactly 10 years ago that I committed to learning public speaking and learning how to teach workshops, how to facilitate rituals, because the work that I wanted to do out there in the world, I really wanted to be the behind-the-scenes person, but I realized that wasn't how it was going to work out. That if I wanted to make these things happen, I had to learn the skills to go do it. And so that's part of when I teach public speaking, that's a lot of what I teach. Is like, if you want things to happen, if I can do it, anybody can. I actually just originally wanted to write fiction. I've been writing fiction since I was in 3rd grade, and that's always been my dream. So the leadership training was kind of the accident, but it's definitely a calling. It's something that I wouldn't give up now that I've started doing it.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. So on this show, 44 interviews, there's only one question that we ask everyone who's on, and that is, what led you to being a priestess? How did you get on the priestess path? If you started writing when you were in the 3rd grade, I'm thinking maybe it was a long time ago. But tell us about how you came to be a priestess.
Well, I was raised to be a hippie. My parents were both very kind of hippie, new agey, cosmic, mystical. Oh yeah. They my mom was more into kind of energy healing stuff. My dad was into, I don't know why I sum him up. My dad was into ancient Egypt, Aztecs, pyramids, ancient aliens, Atlantis, Edgar Cayce, Jesus as a Reiki healer, ascended masters thing. So actually, my middle name is Shauna Ora. My middle name is Ora because when my mom was pregnant with me, they had a friend who saw auras, and she saw my aura, so they thought, oh, we should name her Ora. And apparently, my grandmother said, do you hate this child already? So they made it my middle name instead of my first name.
That's awesome.
Which, it got me teased anyways because anything different, of course, gets you teased and rejected in the public school system. But what got me specifically on the path? So I mean, I was already raised with a lot of woo woo, but not necessarily any particular spiritual path or religious path. I wasn't raised Christian, but I was raised in the dominant culture.
Hmm.
Um, so that definitely influenced me. But I read a lot of fantasy novels growing up. Both of my parents were avid fantasy readers, and that's what got me interested in writing fantasy. But in fantasy novels, you often have priests and priestesses of these ancient religions, and that was kind of interesting to me. But that was obviously fiction. And then somewhere in there, I started reading about Celtic mythology. And once I started reading about Celtic mythology, and then I started reading about the Druids, so we're talking like I was about 12 or 13 at this point. Um, some kind of fire in the head, as the Celts would say, was just lit in me, and so I just started ordering more and more Celtic. I call them my Celtic nerd books. Just lots and lots of books on Celtic myth and Druids, and then I discovered I started working at the Renaissance Fair, the local Renaissance Fair here in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of pagans at Renaissance fairs, and uh, I was about 15 when I finally understood that there was actually this whole subculture of pagans out there, and that these ancient religions that you see in a lot of fantasy books, that like there were people doing that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, this is actually a thing. Like there was actually people doing this stuff. And so that's about the time when I realized that that's what I was. Um, as far as being a priestess in specific, which I tend to see the word priestess, there's a lot of different definitions of priestess,
Hmm.
and I'll use two for the purposes here. One is one's own personal connection to the divine. That each person can have that direct connection to the divine. But the other way the word priestess is often used is in a context of leadership. And so as I'm discovering that this paganism thing exists, I'm having these epic dreams, these massive, like I've lived, you know, just this huge experiential thing while I sleep, and I wake up and I'm like, oh, where am I? It's like just really huge dreams, and in some of them, I'm serving as a priestess. I'm in a temple of some kind. I'm there's lots of different specific things that are going on in these dreams, but that kind of all came together around the same time that I learned that, oh, there's these people out there doing this pagan thing, and there's druids out there, and isn't that's cool? About the time when I was having these dreams where I was serving in that capacity. So that was about the time when I both felt that divine connection as well as I wanted to serve in that way, but I didn't know what that looked like at the time. I didn't know, I wasn't part of any communities at the time. I knew that there were pagans out there, but I wasn't part of, I was just a teenager. I wasn't part of any groups. Um, I started trying to go to public rituals when I was 18. I was in college and I went to a public ritual. It was a terrible public ritual. It wasn't really very good. Well, okay, let me take a step back on that. It was very cliquish, and the people facilitating it did not do anything to make the newcomers feel welcome. I was painfully shy at the time. Um, and I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't really familiar with Wiccan style ritual. Um, so I was very confused, and it was very off-putting. And so I thought, wow, I get more spiritual connection out of dancing at a rave or at a club, um, or at the drum jam at a sci-fi convention or something like that. Uh, Ultimately, it was when I started attending reclaiming tradition classes in Chicago that I not only discovered, like, oh, this ecstatic ritual thing, that's incredible. Like, I'm actually feeling something in a ritual with other people, whereas usually I only felt things by myself. so that was happening, and then there was a very clear path to leadership within the reclaiming tradition. It's very anarchistic in a way, and it's pretty much, if you're 2 feet around the ground and you are here and you're stepping into this work, then you are on the path to leadership.
Well,
And
tell us what reclaiming work is about.
sure. Well, and at this point in my life, I consider myself as reclaiming is a very specific tradition of witchcraft. I I affirm the principles of unity is the reclaiming, basically to be a reclaiming witch. The only thing you have to do is affirm the principles of unity and say, yes, I'm in alignment with everything in this document. That's really the only thing you need formally to be a reclaiming witch, and I do. But as far as the reclaiming community goes, I kind of orbit. Like, I have a lot of friends in reclaiming, and I sometimes do work with those folks, and my style is very similar. But I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself a reclaiming tradition insider at this point. If just to offer that separation, but reclaiming. Starhawk is probably the biggest name in reclaiming. Maka Nightmare is another name, although she's kind of stepped out of reclaiming as well at this point. And reclaiming has roots in the Anderson fairy tradition, among other things. But it's very much about. There's a lot of feminist tradition. There's a lot of you use consensus process in reclaiming, nonviolent communication. There's a lot of combinations of both magic and activism, spirituality and activism. Very anarchistic in the sense of anarchy, not in the sense of chaos, but in the sense of, hey, you want to get this thing done, great, go, lead the charge on getting that thing done. Like, you propose that, step into that and make it happen. It's very much about personal empowerment. There's a lot of stuff about reclaiming that I really like and support. But what hooked me was the ecstatic ritual. It's ecstatic ritual, so there's lots of singing, dancing, chanting. It's very participatory. Participation is invited. And it really sums up my approach to ritual facilitation, which is, if I am leading a ritual, I am not there to do the ritual for you. I'm not there to put on a show for you. I am there to facilitate an experience by which we each together call the elements. We each together call the deities. I'm there to give you a framework, whether you're brand new, this is your first ritual, or you've been to dozens of rituals. I'm there to give you a framework to help and step in, and we do this together. So that all really, it touched me on a core level, like, experiencing the reclaiming style of ritual work. I thought, oh, this is fantastic, this is great, because the ecstatic work, the singing and the dancing, really connected me to that greater divine in a way that I hadn't been in some time.
Well, that's very interesting, because in my opinion, when someone is leading a ritual, it is exactly like you say. They're providing a framework. There are going to be people there who've never done it before. You need to hold the space so that everybody's kind of on the same page, and yet everybody is going to have their own experience. And to me, a really good leader understands how to do that. And it's not about their ego, it's about the group experience, which sounds like what you have been doing. And I'm wondering if that is what you teach in some of these writings I see that you do.
Yeah, it's, I would say I know a lot of people who have that philosophy as far as ritual facilitation goes. It's one thing to have the philosophy. It's a lot harder to facilitate that, because when you're stepping into a ritual, and you're there to, like, I call it the plot arc of the ritual. Like, just like plotting a novel, plotting a novel, it's the same as a movie. Like, you get introduced to the characters, you know what's going on, you get introduced to the setting, and then something happens and the tension builds, and then more things happen and the tension continues to build, and then there's a climactic scene where things are resolved and you know that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to, and then you kind of finish things out. And I see a ritual having kind of the same flow. But so there's my intention for what the plot arc of the ritual is. Like, okay, because I'm actually going to be facilitating a ritual on Friday at Paganicon, and it's going to be a pretty big ritual, and there's a lot of moving parts. So there's a plan. There's like, okay, we're going to go to the underworld, and people are going to get to a state of catharsis. They're going to be doing some releasing work, letting go of some of the stuff that's held them back, and so I'm going to be really trying to get people into this emotional, cathartic kind of a state. There's that intention, but then there's how the ritual actually plays out. And sometimes when you facilitate a ritual like that, somebody goes in fast and deep really early on, and then that changes the flow of things. Or sometimes you're facilitating something that you think is like, oh, this is pretty low impact. Like, I have some friends who did a ritual once. It was for a group of women. It was just supposed to be like springtime, happiness. When's a time you've been happy, and going back to that place. And half the women in the room were just having a great time, and it was just really comforting and lots of joy. And half the women were like, I hate my life. I don't want to be here. Like, this is not where I wanted to be in my life. I'm not happy. So there's my intention as a ritualist to make that space, but then what do you do if you've made that space and the ritual goes way...
Yeah. What do you do? What do you do when you find out that half your people didn't get with the ritual arc plan, and they're maybe freaking out? How do you pull that back in? How do you hold that space and maintain that place of integrity as a leader, and also as a guide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, there are times where I've facilitated where I'm watching kind of a split happen, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, huh? What am I gonna do with that? There's two things as a facilitator. There's one is that before I do any ritual, any ritual, I do kind of a pre-ritual talk or a pre-ritual briefing. The briefer the better, but I need to give enough context. So I might, the first thing is, especially if nobody, like if I'm doing a ritual at a festival or a ritual in Chicago and there's a bunch of new folks, these people don't trust me to take them to the underworld. They don't know who I am,
right?
So I need to introduce myself and let them know, like, I know what I'm doing. You can trust me to take you into this space. So that's part of what it's doing. I'm inspiring them for the theme. I'm letting them know, like, hey, we're going to be going on a journey into the underworld, and isn't that exciting? Some themes are more exciting than others. I tend to like journeys to the underworld because I like shadow work. But I'm letting people know, like, this is what we're doing. This is some of the experiential stuff that we're going to be doing. So I inspire them, and if I'm going to be asking them any questions later in the ritual, I'll seed those during this point in the ritual. I might ask people, like, what's something you need to let go of? What's something you need to cut away? I might ask them, what are some of the things in this particular ritual I'm doing on Friday? They're going to have there will be a number of kind of shrine altar type areas where people can do a specific thing, and they have to pick which one they're going to do. And so some of them are going to go into what I call the mirror gate, and they're going to face themselves in the mirror. They're going to look into the mirror and face their shadows. Some can go and speak something to an ancestor at a different space. So it's all those different things. If I'm going to be doing anything complicated in the ritual, I need to let people know that way ahead of time. If I want people to do a physical tasks in the ritual, which is having people participate by doing something physical is one of the best things you can do in your ritual to get people included and involved. The problem is that
chanting comes in.
What's that?
Is that one of the ways your chanting comes in?
Chanting is part of that. I would say chanting is when you add the auditory layer to it, and chanting can be used to hold space while people are doing a physical thing. By physical thing, I mean more like I'd like for everybody to stand and go to one of these 5 altars, and at this altar you can burn a piece of paper, which we can't do because it's at a hotel, but at other rituals, burning things is great. That's a great experiential thing for people to do. You can take a stone from a bowl, you can put a stone into a bowl of water, cutting a string. There's all sorts of different physical things you can have people do in a ritual. And what it does is it takes them out of that, like we might have just done a trance journey, which is kind of an internal thing, but then they get to actually physicalize it, and it lays it deeper. It lays the work a lot more deeply. The problem with physical tasks like that is that they add so much complexity to a ritual, and that's how you get these 3-hour tours where people are waiting in line to talk to a deity or burn their piece of paper or what have you, and that is where you watch your ritual energy just tank. So that's as far as teaching things, when and what happens when things diverge. You had asked, what do I do to kind of manage that? So the first thing is I let people know what we're doing ahead of time, so that they know, so that they aren't sitting there going in the middle of ritual going, oh, what am I supposed to do now? Like they know what the general plan is. They know what the themes are, and I also give them permission to not engage. What I will tell them very clearly is that if we're going to the underworld and you have some shadow stuff that's coming up that is too big for this ritual to hold, don't force yourself to go there. Take a step back. Take self-responsibility for that. And I'll tell you what, I do these pretty cathartic rituals, but I do not have people having meltdowns. They have catharsis. They might grieve. They might make sounds of anger or joy, but they do not melt down. I've only had one person in a ritual ever have a meltdown, and there were other issues. I call him anger management guy when I teach classes. But so then, like, if you've laid a really strong foundation during your pre-ritual talk, like if you have a good plan for your logistics and you've laid a solid foundation with that pre-ritual talk, that is going to solve most of the challenges. The problem is when those challenges do arise, then it's like, okay, what are we doing now? I will say the single most useful thing for me is just being able to adapt, like just being able to observe and notice, okay, this thing's going on and I need to do something. I would say the next thing after that is if I even have one co-facilitator, like if I even have one other person that I can kind of bounce off with, one of us can work with one energy. Like let's in the example of an anger management guy, I had a co-facilitator, and the co-facilitator went and worked with the guy that was having the issue and moved him off to the side. And so one person can hold the main group, and then another person can go and work with the other folks, and then you can kind of bring it into alignment. One ritual that I did, I had, let's just say there were some confusions in the organizing process, and there were kind of two planning teams that were planning at cross purposes, but we didn't know this until later. And I was largely just there to facilitate the ritual, but pretty much all of my rituals are I ask people to not be drinking before the ritual, and certainly not during. Some of the people who had taken on planning this event encouraged people to bring your own beverage, and that people could have wine with dinner, but then a bunch of folks brought hard liquor. And so half of the people attending this ritual wanted a very serious ritual. It was for Yule. And half of the people who were there had open alcoholic beverages, and they wanted more of a hootenanny. So then I'm left with these two very different energies in the group, and I had to somehow bring them together. What I will say is ecstatic ritual is great for that, because you get people singing and chanting, and eventually they do tend to harmonize into a single place. Yeah.
So what people are you talking about in these kind of rituals? I mean,
can you say that again?
At these rituals where you have all these groups, are you talking about? You said sometimes people have to wait 3 hours. So how many people are you talking about that you're facilitating in a ritual?
It really depends. if I'm teaching a workshop, or I'm sorry, if I'm teaching workshops at like a festival or something, and then doing ritual at the festival, the festival ritual could be 50 people, it could be 200 people. I think the biggest ritual I've ever done was several hundred people.
That's a lot. That's a lot
It
to hold.
it is. It is. I'll say this though, it's kind of fun once you get them chanting and get everybody singing that chant, and you've got like three layers of the chant, and then you've got the drums coming in, and you've got a couple different types of harmony coming in. It's pretty cool.
Oh,
It's
let's
pretty
go.
cool.
I'm ready.
I'm ready too. Yeah, it's the ritual I'm doing on Friday should have between 100 and 200 people.
That's a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a lot. Yeah. Um, but again, it's like, oh, once we get to that place where we're all chanting, and it's hard getting people chanting. I would say that's one of the hardest things to do in ritual is getting people chanting, because we're taught in our culture, like, if you're not a singer, you shouldn't sing.
Hmm.
And but I tell you what, when once people get into it, and then they let go of, like, oh, I'm afraid of chanting, like, once they get into it, then it sounds amazing. But it can take a while, and like, and I'm out there and I'm singing and I'm smiling, I'm like, all right, don't give me the fishy eyes, don't just stare at me, sing, come on. And trying to get people to that place. But so yeah, I mean,
I've been in a large group that chanted. I was at a conference a long time ago, and Barbara Marciniak was there, who channels Pleiadians. And she gave her talk, and then she said, so let's just all chant with the P's, the Pleiadians. And there's like
mm,
200 people in the room, and she got us all chanting, and then she was channeling in the Pleiadians who were chanting. Nobody wanted to leave. It was really beautiful, very powerful. I think chanting is an enormously strong, powerful vehicle. That's very cool.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good time. But yeah, I mean, some of the rituals that I'm doing, I mean, it can range. Like, if I'm doing a public ritual in Chicago, that can range anywhere from 30 to 80 people. But yeah, I would say the biggest ritual I've ever done was probably when I did the main ritual for Pagan Spirit Gathering. It was over 500 people. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So when you look back on these times when you were 13 and wanting to get involved, did you think that this is where you were going? Did you ever have, with these epic dreams you were having, did you ever think you'd be standing up with 500 people and leading ritual for them and making it work?
No, that wasn't really what I had envisioned. I had envisioned more, well, because I mean, my background is in, well, I've been painting since I could hold a brush, and when I was in high school, I got into tech theater, and so, like, as I'm having these dreams, I guess I always figured I'd be more of the behind the scenes person, because that's at the, I mean, I'm an introvert. I mean, people are like, how can you lead 500-person rituals when you're an introvert? It's,
I
well,
don't know. How do you do that?
um, that's a great question, and I don't know that I can really answer it. You- I can't answer it, actually, because it's something. I did a ritual facilitation intensive a couple of years ago, and I was talking to my friend River Higginbotham. He's an author, and he and I both trained at Diana's Grove. And we were talking about, like, there's this thing where I'm trying to help people learn how to facilitate rituals, and there's people who are willing to do the work to learn how to do it, and there's people who aren't. And I said, like, what, I was trying to work out with him, like, what's the difference between those folks? Like, how do we get people, like, I said, because I can teach people technique until my throat goes dry, but it's more than the technique. You have to want it. You have to want to go out there and do this. And that's what I really came down to, is it's the call. It's sometimes what I call the desire. And it's desire with a capital D. It's
Mhm.
I wanted this badly enough to get past my shyness. And I don't know if I can articulate in words how big of a hump that was for me. I mean, that was really, really difficult. I used to be the shy person in the room who couldn't make eye contact. I used to be the person who, like, I didn't know how to initiate a conversation with people. I mean, heck, I attend festivals to this day where I'm like the guest of honor at the festival, and I don't feel like I can go up to people and say hi because I mean, at the core, I'm really actually very shy when it comes to that. But when it's stepping in to serve in the capacity of leading a workshop or facilitating a ritual, it's just I want this for the group. I want this experience for them. I want them to know how awesome it is to be chanting and dancing and feeling that you're reaching up for the divine and you can feel the divine's fingertips touching yours. And I know that we're going to get there. I know that if I can get that group singing and dancing, I can get them there. And to do that, I have to get out there and I have to sing and make that space. And so, once I get in that mode of just I want to bring that to the group, shyness is not a problem for me when I'm in that mode. Now, after I've been teaching, like this weekend, I'm going to be at Paganicon in the Twin Cities. When I come back from that, I hide in bed and read romance novels and don't want to talk to anybody for 2 weeks. So,
yeah, you have to recover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting because I think I'm kind of a loner, so I never have done large groups, but to me it's that being able to connect with what Spirit's calling you to do, like you said, a calling. And if that's something that is important, then it will be followed. And I think that it's very important. People do it all in their own style, but I think that it's very important for me to feel like when I'm in a ritual with someone that they're aligned with that cause and that they're not just off on some personal little trip, So, and I think that if someone is like that, the rituals don't go very far. They end up with people maybe, breaking off and doing other things. But I think when the leader is truly aligned with that divine spirit, that it channels through to everybody else. And that's the gift of a really great leader. And I don't think a lot of people are able to do that. So I think it's really wonderful for you to have overcome your shyness and been able to, like you say, desire it enough to make that happen. So that's it's just curious sometimes when we look back and go, gosh, that 13-year-old going to her rituals, or that 18-year-old in her first public ritual, you were planting all the seeds that far back, and the divine said, oh, come on, I got a job for you.
Well, I think what I envisioned at some point, and it's not that I've necessarily given up on this dream, but it's definitely shifted shape quite a bit. There was a certain point where what I figured I was supposed to be doing was building temples. Now I've kept an eye on a number of different pagan groups, goddess temples, things like that. So I know that there are some folks who have done that. I know that there are pagan groups who have tried to make community center type spaces happen, and there have been varying degrees of success. Most of them have failed after a few years. So I know that the model is not large scale viable as far as the community center model goes. But I think that there are certain places where specific temples, people have been able to manifest those. Of course, what I have in mind are large marble basilica dome kind of,
Yeah, bring it on. Get it going on.
I could, well, because I make things. I'm an artist, and I not only just I paint things, but I also I just make stuff. I'm always making things, and I actually built an outdoor shrine out at Dinah's Grove Dinah's Grove was a retreat center and mystery school, and it no longer exists in that form, but I lived out there on the land for a while at the retreat center, and I built this shrine to Bridget, and I we're talking like a large grove of trees, and I flagstoned the ground, and I built little shrines in the around the edges of the grove, and then I mosaicked a spiral coming out of the center. I did all sorts of crazy stuff, and I had even bigger plans for it. But the irony is, once I actually moved out there, I never had time to move on, to work on the shrine itself. There was always just too much land maintenance work to do. But so yeah, I mean, I could easily spend a large portion of the rest of my life just carving spiral grooves into a floor, or painting murals, or mosaicing a dome or something like that. I mean, I'm that kind of obsessive when it comes to little art details.
A lot of women for a long time have, and you say, and some of them, of course, like you say, you follow them, but so many women want the temple. They want the goddess center. They want the place to go. They want to make that place. I was in a circle one time, and we were envisioning it right down to heated rose quartz crystal floors. And it was amazing what different women's vision of the temple was. But what was universal was that we all wanted to go back to the temple. And we all wanted to be there. And we all wanted to be in that role of, this is where I belong, is in the temple, doing temple work. And I just think it's so interesting that that is a vision that is shared by so many women right now, and men too. But mostly women that I know of have shared that vision. And so do you think that's a remembering of old times of being priestesses, or do you think it's more of a call to what's coming?
I would have to say it's both. I think those of us that have this vision, I think and because that was a big factor in a lot of the dreams that I had, that called me to this path. I think a lot of us are remembering a time when we've done that in the past, whether you're talking genetic memories, or you're talking past lives, or just general connection to the wisdom of our ancestors. Whichever woo to it, I think any number of those could be. We are remembering when we did that. And at the same time, I think that I'm a pantheist, and so I don't necessarily believe that a church is more sacred than the ground next to it, or that a temple is more sacred than the land it sits on. So I believe that everything is sacred. What I believe that a temple or even a shrine can help us to do is remember that we're in sacred space. I have a whole nerdy tangent that I could go on, and I'll keep it short. Just to I read a lot about architecture and the combination of architecture and psychology. There's an architect named Christopher Alexander. He's written some fantastic books about basically the psychology of spaces, and one of the things that he writes about sacred space is actually something I read a lot in books that talk about pilgrimage, and it's just that a sacred space has this kind of there are these similar architectural elements used in shrines and temples, and there's kind of the outer area and the more inner area, and then the sacred mysteries at the center, and you have to go through these barriers of entry to get to that place. And and I think that just calls to us, and I think we want to have that again, and I think that it serves. I mean, being able to go into a place that just helps remind me on every level, just kinesthetically around me, just that the design of the space reminds me that I am connected to the divine. I think there's a lot of power in that, and it's certainly something that I hope to bring about.
Well, I think it's why so many people are traveling to sacred sites, whether it's Egypt or Stonehenge or Glastonbury or Machu Picchu or India, wherever it is. There's this desire to go and experience that exactly what you're talking about. The architecture, which holds then the vibration and the space in a certain pattern. Because if you go to something that's just a barn, that energy is going to peak and then be very big on the inside. But if you go to a dome, then it's going to be different. And I agree with you that going through the outer passages into an inner passage is incredibly powerful and very symbolic of what we're doing within our own selves, how we're traveling through our own psyche and our own subconscious levels to get to the heart of something that we maybe have locked up and forgot about. That nice, wonderful, sacred shrine within us where I think we're all searching for that. And I agree with you that the sacred spaces are incredible, and I also agree with you that they can be anywhere. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to go to Egypt, although I would love to do that all the time, but we don't have to do that. We can make our own sacred space with our own intentions and a simple altar, or our attention and focus on even a small area that can give us that peace.
I absolutely would love to go to Egypt as well. The place where I'm definitely I've had my eye set on a pilgrimage to Glastonbury for quite some time. Glastonbury and Stonehenge and a bunch of the different megalithic sites, Newgrange in Ireland. Those are definitely that's definitely in the works for me at some point.
Yeah.
Machu Picchu would be great. The spiders are too big. So I don't think that's...
I didn't know there were big spiders there.
Well, once you get past St. Louis, most spiders are too big for me. The further south you go, the bigger the spiders get. And
oh my gosh, that's funny. So I gather. So do you have much of a relationship with grandmother spider then?
You know, spiders are just and I'm gonna throw up the must be ancestral memory or something flag. Spiders of size just freak me out. So, probably Machu Picchu is out, but Egypt I might be able to do once the area is a little bit less dangerous to travel to. But definitely
bats in Egypt. The bats are wonderful, but they're not very big. But I don't recall spiders.
Yeah, bats I can handle. Bats I can handle. Not so much spiders. But yeah, Glastonbury is definitely on Glastonbury and a number. I'm a megalith nerd. I'm an absolute nerd for megalith sites. I blame my dad. He was always into all that stuff, so I would actually like to go see some of it. But definitely definitely the British Isles.
Yes.
So yeah, it is very, very interesting that so many people are called to these pilgrimages to those sites, but also called to build them again, to begin creating them again. And I affirm that and I support it, and I would like to see more of that happening. If I win the lottery, you know what I'll be building.
Yeah, you will be. So I think it's interesting that the news, if you choose to tune into network news of any kind, it's horrific. And yet we know there's lots of other good things going on. But sometimes I think that all the focus on the horrific just helps us feel the need to bring that divine connection back, so that when we hear all that going on, instead of going, oh my gosh, what's the use, blah, 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 instead I feel like it's a call to step up. And maybe you can't be a world leader changer, but boy, there's sure going to be dozens, maybe hundreds of people in your life every day that you have an opportunity to interact with in another way, which is part of what I think being a priestess is showing up where you are and getting past the dramas and the fears of what's going on and helping anchor down that divine connection wherever we go. And it's not easy. Sometimes I find myself, in a bad mood or complaining, or, oh, that person just drove me nuts, what's the matter with them? And I'll hear myself going, oh, really being a good priestess today, aren't you, Raven? That's really terrific. But I think that's part of it, is remembering that we need our temples, we need our sacred spaces, and we need to always reconnect with our rituals, art, however we do it, our prayers, our altars, however we do that, to stay connected to that divine call so that we don't get sucked into the meltdowns and the anger management people.
Well, and you know that I teach, when I teach leadership, it's, yes, it's much like with ritual. Yes, I can teach you leadership tools, I can teach group dynamics, I can teach communication tools, I can teach conflict resolution. All of that is not going to help anybody who is constantly causing their own drama.
Yeah.
And and here's the thing. I mean, I've done it. I've been there. I've been the one causing my own problems. Most of the time, and this is why I love doing shadow work and ritual, because I think it's so important. Most of us are causing our own problems for ourselves, and gosh, is that really hard to acknowledge. I mean, let me just say that. Like, when I realized that I was the one coming into groups with the chip on my shoulder, and I was the one kind of pre-rejecting myself, and all sorts of other things. That's not an easy thing to acknowledge and to work past. But once we can acknowledge, here's what I'm responsible for, and here's what I can work to change, to shift and adapt, and here's the stuff that the world has dumped on me, and this is the stuff that's not my fault. And this is the stuff that I can't fix, I can't change. And then here's the stuff in the middle that's, it kind of could be either, and some of this stuff is like maybe stuff I can work with, maybe not. It kind of depends. And but I think looking into that shadow mirror is really so important, and it's some of the hardest work there is. I mean, you look at all the different spiritual, magical books out there, and people want, like, how many people come to the path of goddess spirituality or paganism or any of the, I just call them we could call them alternative spiritualities, or we could just call it generally woo-woo kind of stuff. How many people come to it wanting to be special, wanting to be acknowledged for being special, wanting to have what I refer to as phenomenal cosmic power, like people who are reading books on magic because they want to have this power. And, when you look at it, when you really dig under it, why do you want to be told you're special? Why do you want to be special and be told you're special? Why do you want this power? If you want to be told you're special, it's because you have self-esteem issues because of the culture we grew up in, which is just decimating to our sense of self.
It certainly is.
People who want power typically are because they haven't had any power in their lives. They haven't had any control in what's going on with them. They may have been anything from physically abused to verbally abused to just having life dump on them. And so
so that brings me to a question I want to ask you. So I totally agree with you. So here are these people that want empowerment, they want acknowledgement, they want the power, and they find a place where that's happening. They find rituals, they find groups, they find I don't want to pick on anybody. They find covens, they find priestess groups, whatever it is, right? And they go, oh, I can do that here. What I want to know is, how do you see the ethics of the magic and the power and the divine? A lot of people don't want anything to do with rules. How do you, as a leader, help people to understand the ethical responsibility of the power, of the leadership? Or do you find that that is an issue?
Oh, it's a huge issue, and it's a large reason why I teach leadership, and I also write about abusive leaders. That's actually, unfortunately, been a theme of a lot of my blog posts in the past year. Is because I travel and I teach leadership, and because I talk about sexual abuse on some of my blogs, people talk to me about things that they've experienced. And while most of that is either stuff that I need to hold confidential for those folks because they're speaking to me in confidence, or it's things people have checked in with me about a specific leader, and I can't corroborate it. I can't say, well, yes, I saw this happen. All I can say is, well, I heard from such and such person that Coven leader A raped them. Well, it's hearsay at that point. But but people do check in with me about these things, and so I am in the occasionally awkward position of knowing rather a lot about people who are in positions of leadership, and I'm in the position of I have to kind of determine for myself first, like, okay, what's going on here? Like, is this because on the one hand, there is an unfortunate tendency within any subculture, but the kind of pagan alternative spirituality subculture certainly has this going on, where person A has a breakup with person B, and then they get into a fight, and then they start telling lies about each other to discredit each other in the community. So I have to kind of keep that in mind, like, okay, is somebody coming to me and speaking out about abuses they've suffered from this person because they're really hurt and they're angry? Do they have a personality disorder and they imagined what happened? I have to consider that, but then I also have to consider, okay, well, what is it if this person is actually sexually abusing people in their group?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like, and what does that mean? Largely there's not a whole lot I can do about many of these things because, again, if I haven't seen it, if I haven't directly witnessed it, if I don't have proof, it's not like I can go and blog about this person and say, hey, public service announcement, this person did this thing, because it's like, well, that's not really ethical and responsible on my part. So where I tend to focus my efforts is trying to teach the leaders who are willing to listen and learn. And I do talk about the fact that every community I have taught in, every festival I have taught at, every community I have taught in, every time I teach, I have heard at least one horror story about a local leader. Usually it's not to the level of sexual abuse, but it is often verbal and emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Every time, every time. And I cannot stress this enough, because on the one hand, if you are experiencing a local leader, and I use the word leader just in the sense of, the community acknowledges that this person is a coven leader. We can talk about what being a true leader means, but just using the word leader in that context, you are not alone. If this is happening and you have this leader who is in your local community who is doing horrible stuff, and and you don't know what to do with them, you're not alone. This happens. It is unfortunately not just you. So that's one part of it, is just to know that you're not alone if that's going on. The other thing that's really important to know is that it's not okay. That behavior is not okay. However, there isn't always anything you can do about it, and that's really the crushing kind of one that most people really don't want to hear. What they want to hear is Shauna, how can you fix this? And I'm like, well, not always anything I can do about it. But and that's not always true. Sometimes there are, if somebody's done something illegal, there's other, you should absolutely be going to the police if somebody has done something illegal and you have proof of it. But no, it's just, this stuff does go on, and so that's a lot of what I end up talking about when I teach leadership. Is most of the people who come to my classes actually don't want to define themselves as leaders. They just wanted to be part of a group and there was nothing in their area, or they joined Coven A and found out that Coven leader A was really abusive, and so they left and started their own thing. So, a lot of the people that come to my classes they really don't want to be in a position of leadership, but they felt, they felt the need to make something happen.
Yeah.
And
I think
so I try and do my best.
Excuse me. When?
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, even though we have these places where people come in and want the power and can be abusive, on the other hand, that's happening in the workplace, in the family, all around. And the good news is that when you come into an intentional circle, yes, there's still going to be that going on. However, you have more of a chance of being safe enough to speak up for yourself and learn how to navigate that behavior in a more functional than not ritualistic circle community, and that you end up having the support of people who will say, no, that's not okay, and this is why, and so let's all go do our shadow work and figure out what's going on. And so you have more of a chance to actually learn in that kind of an intentional community how to get through that and become a better person and be able to be stronger in your own self. And so I'm grateful that you do that kind of teaching.
Well, it's something that so many people run into, and again, I try and offer people, like, here's what can happen, here's what goes on, and just to give people more options and more choices. And like I said, I mean, I can teach technique until I'm blue in the face, but at the core of it is the personal work. And there are some leaders out there who are leading groups, and they're never going to do the personal work. They're going to be stuck where they're at. And what do you do with that? And so that's, as far as ethics goes and rules, I'm really big on rules.
Good.
I'm really big on hey, here's our group, here's the defining edge of our group, and what this defining edge of our group is what behavior is appropriate and what behavior is not appropriate. And if you engage in behavior that is not appropriate for this group, at a certain point, we could talk about 3 strikes for most things. At a certain point, I'm going to ask you to not be part of the group because that behavior is not okay.
Good. Well, and I think we could talk about this for a long time, but we are getting to the end of our hour, and I want you to be able to have a chance to talk about your books and your upcoming workshops and what you're doing, and to let people know how to reach you on your website, how to see your beautiful art, how to read about werewolves in the kitchens, and all kinds of wonderful things.
Well, the first place you can check out my stuff, you can find out both the fiction books and the nonfiction, and they're clearly delineated, so you won't stumble into sexy werewolves, without knowing you're heading into that land on my website. But so it's ShaunaAuraKnight.com, and that's ShaunaAuraKnight.com. And that's really the best place to find out about my books. I have for nonfiction, I have out The Leader Within is a collection of articles on leadership, and I talk about a lot of this stuff, a lot of the group dynamic stuff. I'm actually working on a longer, kind of more A to Z leadership handbook. The current leadership book is more of a, hey, here's some problems that you might face in your group, and here's some ways to handle it kind of in article format. Ritual Facilitation is my other book that is it's also articles, and so they're really digestible. They're usually around 2,000 words, 3,000 words. So it's it's shorter chunks of things, so you don't have to like take on reading the whole thing. You read one article at a time, and there's things like chanting, or why set up your space, or how to handle ritual logistics. There's all sorts of different stuff in there, and I talk a lot about ritual logistics and how to manage them and keep them from being unwieldy. The Dream Workbook is currently only available as an ebook, but once I have another book, Dream Work. I think I'm calling it Dreamwork and Underworld Journeys. And once I have that book, I'll probably release the 2 of them as a paperback. And it's Dreamwork is a really powerful tool for personal transformation work. Like if you have shadow stuff, it's going to come up in your dreams. You just have to notice, like, oh, that's what that's about. And I have found it invaluable for my own stuff. It's like, oh yeah, there's that coming up in my dream again. I guess I better go work on that. As far as social media goes, you can find me on Facebook. I can't take any more friend requests because Facebook has cut me off, but I have several fan pages that you can like, and you can contact me, even if it says it's going to the other folder. I'll see it. But you can contact me via my website. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Pinterest. I'm on a lot of different places, but Facebook and email are probably the best places to actually reach me. And as far as teaching, I've got a number of different things coming up. I've got an email list on my website, and I'll be announcing a couple different workshops that I have coming up soon.
And if people want to
So
get on your email list, how do they do that?
on my website, if you go to the about, there's a little it says contact me, and you can join the email list there.
Okay.
Or if you
Well,
can't find it, just email me, and I'll get you on it.
awesome. Well, this has been very enjoyable. I hope Gloria's having a really good time in Florida. And she is needing a much deserved vacation. Although she's working, she's helping a friend move, so she's working, but she's away from her regular routine, and she's in Florida. When I know she loves Florida. So we thank you, Gloria, for putting this program together in the first place. Shauna, it's been delightful to hear all the things you're doing and to visit with you, and thank you so much for your contributions. And I would encourage everyone to go on her website. It's very beautiful. You can look at her art and her books and all of her graphic design work. And I don't know, you may be one of the busiest people I know. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I don't know who's going to be on the show next week, so I guess tune in and find out. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. I wish you all to take a moment before you go to bed, whether you're watching this live or you're watching it later, and remind yourself how it is that you connect with the divine, and how it might be that you also are a priestess serving that divine light that we all carry within us. So thank you very much, and good night to you. Shauna, I'm just going to stop the broadcast. You just stay with me for a minute. Good night, all.
Thank you.